The first sound I heard that morning wasn't the soft creak of my barn doors or the hum of the pasture waking up. It was metal, sharp, deliberate, and wrong. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee on the porch, watching the fog lift off the fields, when it hit me that someone was inside my barn. At first, I thought maybe it was my neighbor's son stopping by early to help with the hay. But then I saw the car, a spotless silver crossover parked halfway on my gravel driveway, halfway on the grass, its bumper glinting with one of those shiny HOA decals like a badge of power. And that's when I knew. It wasn't a farmhand. It was trouble. Around here, trouble usually had a name. Margaret Holloway, president of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. And if you ever met Margaret, you'd know immediately. She didn't knock before barging into people's lives. She had this air of self-importance that made you think she was auditioning for God. She'd been on my case ever since the HOA annexed my little patch of farmland into their community improvement district. I still don't know who thought putting a working farm inside an HOA was a good idea, but they did, and she'd made it her mission to scrub out anything that didn't fit her magazine cover idea of suburbia. I could hear her voice echoing from inside the barn before I even got close, sharp, nasal, cutting through the quiet morning air like a mosquito in church. This is disgusting. Unsanitary. Then came a crash, like a bucket hitting the ground. You can't keep animals this close to a residential perimeter. It's a violation. I almost laughed. She sounded like a city inspector who'd wandered onto a farm for the first time in her life. I eased the barn door open just enough to peek inside. There she was, standing in designer heels sunk halfway into straw, a beige trench coat dusted with hay, one hand holding her phone, the other gesturing dramatically like she was hosting a reality show. She was recording everything, muttering into the camera about evidence of noncompliance. I leaned on the doorframe, sipped my coffee, and said, "Morning, Margaret. You lost." She spun around so fast her heel snapped against a rake handle. "You can't keep livestock this close to the HOA line," she snapped, adjusting her coat like she was the sheriff of good taste. "I've told you repeatedly, Article 7, Section 3 clearly prohibits unregistered agricultural structures. This barn's been here since 1952, I said. Your precious bylaws didn't even exist back then." Her face went tight, that little twitch people get when they're about to explode but don't want to ruin their lipstick. "We extended jurisdiction last spring. You were notified." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean that pamphlet you left in my mailbox without a stamp?" "Yeah, that's not a legal notice. That's litter." Her jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard her molars crack. "You think you're clever, but you can't ignore community standards." Behind her, my bull, Brutus, shifted in his stall, snorting through the hay. He was a massive, rust-colored beast with the patience of a monk until someone started yelling. Margaret froze when she heard him. What is that?" she asked, eyes darting toward the pen. "My bull," I said casually. "His name's Brutus. He doesn't like uninvited guests." Brutus snorted again, a deep, thunderous sound that made the dust shake loose from the rafters. Margaret stumbled backward, tripped over a bucket, and dropped her phone. "You can't. That's dangerous. I could report you for keeping aggressive animals." "You could," I said, smiling. "But you'd have to explain how you ended up inside my locked barn first." For a second, I saw fear flicker across her face, then pride stomped it out. "I had probable cause to inspect," she declared. "There were complaints." "From who?" "You again." Her lips tightened. "You'll regret mocking me. The board will hear about this." "Sure," I said, holding the door open for her. "Make sure to tell them how you trespassed too." She huffed past me, limping slightly, heels full of straw, perfume trailing behind like exhaust smoke. Her SUV shot down the road, tires spitting gravel. I looked at Brutus. He stared back at me, calm as ever. "Good boy," I said. "You handled that just fine." I thought that would be the end of it. But with Margaret Holloway, nothing ever ended. The next morning, I found a bright red envelope taped to my gate. Notice of noncompliance, bold letters across the top, followed by a fine. $10,000 for unauthorized agricultural activity. I almost spit out my coffee. $10,000 for existing. I took the letter straight to the sheriff's office. Tom Weaver, a friend since high school, read it twice before shaking his head. "She's trying to pull jurisdiction over your land? That's not even legal. Tell that to her," I said. He chuckled. "She's trespassing, filing false claims, and pretending to be the county. I'll have a word with her." But I underestimated her. People like Margaret don't get embarrassed, they double down. 2 days later, I caught her back near my fence, this time with a clipboard and a guy in a cheap suit measuring my property line like they were planning a space launch. The guy looked nervous. Margaret barked orders about unregistered outbuildings and visual compliance. I walked up, leaned on the fence, and said, "You know, you could just ask for a tour next time." She didn't even glance up. "We're performing an assessment. You'll be receiving demolition orders." "On what grounds?" I asked. "Unregistered structure within a protected view corridor," she said, reading straight from her clipboard like it was the Bible. "You mean my barn?" I said. "The one that's older than your HOA?" The man with the tape measure froze when Brutus snorted again. Margaret ignored him, right until Brutus stomped his hoof, hard enough to rattle the fence. That was all it took. She squealed, dropped her clipboard, and bolted to her car. The suit guy followed, tripping over his own feet. I picked up the clipboard, tossed it into the dirt, and said softly, "That's what happens when you mess with Brutus." That night, I started locking the barn with new padlocks. But 2 days later, I noticed scratches on the latch. Someone had tried to pry it open again. I knew then she wasn't going to stop. Margaret wasn't just a control freak. She was obsessed. From there, it got worse. She printed flyers warning neighbors about a dangerous bull on residential property. I laughed so hard I made my coffee spill. So I printed my own flyers. Same red letters, same layout, except mine said, "Dangerous trespasser, HOA president on the loose." I tacked them all over town. By noon, half the county was laughing. The other half was calling it poetic justice. That's when she held the infamous safety committee meeting. Picture a church basement filled with folding chairs and tension. Margaret stood at the front with a projector showing blown-up photos of Brutus mid-snort. "This animal," she said dramatically, "charged at community members." I raised my hand. "You mean you, Margaret?" The crowd chuckled. "This is not a joke," she snapped. "This is about protecting our children and our peace." A man in the back raised his hand. "Didn't you break into his barn?" Another woman added, "That's trespassing, isn't it?" Margaret's face turned crimson. "I was performing my duty," she barked. "Without permission," someone else said. Laughter rippled through the room. She slammed her laptop shut and stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire. The crowd clapped. For the first time, she didn't look powerful, she looked small. But humiliation doesn't humble people like her. It ferments. That night, I found garbage dumped behind my barn, black bags filled with food waste and old paint cans. Someone was trying to frame me for unsanitary storage. Lucky for me, my cameras caught everything. 2 guys sneaking around at midnight, one of them the same clipboard assistant from earlier. I called Sheriff Weaver. He came by, took one look at the footage, and sighed. "She's really losing it. That's tampering and illegal dumping." We filed a report, but it only fueled her fire. A few nights later, someone spray-painted the side of my barn with dripping black letters, "Community Menace." That was it. I'd had enough. Weaver promised to push charges if she kept it up. But Margaret wasn't just spiraling, she was unraveling. Then came the night she crossed the line. Around 3 a.m., my motion alert pinged. I opened the feed and saw headlights in my driveway. A figure stepped out. Margaret, wearing a raincoat, holding a gas can. My stomach turned cold. I grabbed my flashlight and ran. By the time I reached the barn, the smell of fuel hit me. She was standing there, lighter trembling in her hand, whispering to herself, "You ruined everything. You made them all laugh at me." "Margaret," I shouted. She spun, eyes wild, mascara streaked. "You took everything from me," she screamed. "My reputation, my position, my control. You did that yourself," I said softly. "You tried to control everyone until it broke you." She stumbled backward, tears cutting lines through the dirt on her face. "You don't understand," she said. "This place was perfect before you." I took a step closer. "Perfection's a prison, Margaret. You built it yourself." She shook her head violently. "No, I built order. You brought chaos." Brutus snorted behind me, and she flinched like the sound was a gunshot. The lighter slipped from her fingers, landing harmlessly in the mud. For a long moment, she just stood there, shaking. Then the flashing blue lights of Weaver's cruiser cut through the fog. He stepped out, hand on his holster, eyes hard. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "put your hands where I can see them." She didn't fight. She just cried. When they led her away, she whispered, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just watched as the red and blue lights faded down the road, leaving nothing but silence and the low, steady breath of my bull. After that, life felt like someone turned down the volume on the world. For the first time in months, no letters, no threats, no headlights in my driveway. Neighbors I barely knew started stopping by. One brought pie. Another shook my hand and said, "You did us all a favor." Turns out Margaret had been terrorizing the whole neighborhood for years. Fines for mailbox colors, lawn length, even for kids' bikes left in driveways. Her arrest was like spring rain after a drought. A week later, Sheriff Weaver stopped by again. County prosecutors charging her with trespassing, vandalism, and attempted arson, he said. Probably probation, maybe therapy. But she's done with the HOA. They voted her out. I smiled faintly. Guess she finally perfected something. Her own downfall. He chuckled. Try to enjoy the quiet, will ya? But the quiet didn't last. A month later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, just my name in shaky handwriting. Inside, a short note. Thank you for not pressing for prison. I'm leaving town. I only wanted to make things better. M. For a long time, I stood on the porch, reading it over and over. The ink was smudged like it had been written in tears. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt pity. Margaret wasn't evil. She was broken. She'd built her whole identity around control, and when the world stopped listening, she had nothing left to hold on to. Weeks passed. The HOA dissolved. The town stopped whispering. The story of the woman who broke into the barn and met the bull became local legend, half cautionary tale, half ghost story. Kids dared each other to walk past my fence at night, saying they'd hear Brutus snort whenever her name was mentioned. Then one evening, I came home to find a plain white envelope stuck under my door. 2 words printed on it. Check the barn. No return address, no handwriting. I felt my stomach twist. I grabbed my flashlight and walked out, Brutus already stirring like he sensed something. The barn was quiet, doors closed, everything neat. But when I reached the back door, I noticed it slightly ajar. On the ground outside was one of my trail cameras, unplugged, covered in mud. Someone had taken it off the fence and placed it there. Back inside, I plugged it in. The first few clips were normal: deer, wind, Brutus sleeping. Then came a recording from 2 nights earlier, headlights again, a dark van pulling into my drive at 2 a.m. A figure stepped out, tall, hooded, walking toward my porch. The feed cut off before the door. My pulse hammered. I called Weaver immediately. He came over, watched the footage, and frowned. "That's not her," he said. "But someone knows what happened here." After he left, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house felt loud. Every flicker of the porch light looked like headlights. Then, 3 nights later, my motion alarm buzzed again. This time, the figure was back, same build, same movement, carrying something. A metal canister. My first thought was fuel, but when he stepped into the light, I saw the label, industrial ammonia. I grabbed my rifle and ran. Inside the barn, Brutus was agitated, hooves pounding the dirt. "Hey!" I shouted. The intruder froze. For a split second, our flashlights crossed, and I saw his face. Harold Holloway, Margaret's husband, normally quiet, the man who'd stood behind her at every meeting like a ghost. Now his eyes were bloodshot, hands trembling. "Harold," I said, lowering the gun. "What the hell are you doing?" He swallowed hard. "She told me you ruined her life. Said everyone laughed at her because of you. Said you destroyed everything she built." "She destroyed it herself," I said quietly. "You know that." He shook his head. "You don't understand. She's gone. She escaped the hospital last night. She called me an hour ago, said she's coming home to fix everything." Before I could respond, a car door slammed outside. Headlights swept across the field. Harold's face went pale. "That's her." I pulled him behind the feed barrels. The SUV stopped outside. The engine idled. And then, footsteps, heels crunching gravel. Her voice echoed through the fog, cracked but unmistakable. "You think you can take everything from me and walk away?" I stepped out. "Margaret, stop. You don't need to do this." She looked like a ghost wearing the remnants of her old self. Wild hair, rain-soaked jacket, lighter in one hand, gas can in the other. "You made me a joke," she hissed. "You made them all laugh." "You did that yourself," I said. "Let it go." Harold stood slowly. "Margaret, please," he said, voice breaking. She spun on him, fury snapping through her like lightning. You're supposed to be on my side. I am, he said softly. But this isn't the way. Liar, she screamed, hurling the gas can. It clanged against the dirt, spilling fuel. Brutus roared, slamming the stall door so hard the hinges screamed. The noise shattered the air. Margaret flinched, stumbled, and dropped the lighter. It bounced once, sputtered, then died in the wet straw. I lunged, grabbing her wrist before she could pick it up again. It's over, I said. You've lost everything because you couldn't stop controlling people. For a moment, her face changed, like she heard me, really heard me. Then she yanked free, back toward the door, trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I just wanted things to be perfect again. Perfection's a curse, I said quietly. You chased it until it broke you. Her eyes flickered, then emptied. She turned and ran into the fog. Harold tried to follow, but I held him back. Minutes later, Weaver's cruiser pulled up again. We searched the woods until dawn, but she was gone. They found her SUV near the lake, doors open, headlights dead. After 2 days, they called off the search. No body, no trace, just one muddy heel caught in the reeds. Harold left town a week later. She always said Cedar Ridge was her masterpiece, he told me. Now it's just another ghost town. Life eventually calmed. The HOA dissolved, the signs came down, the neighbors started laughing again. I painted over the black letters on my barn, replaced the old wooden sign by the gate. It used to say Holloway Farm. Now it said, no trespassing, seriously. Most folks chuckled when they saw it. Some didn't get the joke, but those who'd lived through it knew exactly what it meant. Every now and then, when the fog rolls in over the fields, Brutus lifts his head and snorts, staring at the tree-line. And sometimes, I swear, I hear a whisper, not angry, not shouting, just a tired voice carried on the wind, still trying to make everything perfect. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's guilt, or maybe it's just the land remembering what it endured. Either way, I don't go near the lake after dark anymore. And when Brutus stares into the fog like he's seeing something I can't, I just pat his side and say, don't worry, boy. Some ghosts just don't know when to quit. Because around here, in Cedar Ridge, perfection was the real curse.